All right, we're going to go ahead and read chapter 7 today. A little rewind back to chapter 6. Remember, that's when they kidnapped Winnie and they took her deep into the woods because they wanted to tell her the story about the spring and about themselves. And you should have written your cause and effect paper describing a different ending to that chapter. Say what would have happened if Winnie would have said something to the man in the yellow suit. So we're right at the end of chapter 6. May had given Winnie the music box to calm her down, and Winnie had made the connection that that's the music box that her grandma had heard for years. So now in chapter 7, I think we're going to get the story about how the Tucks came to be. It's a very, very interesting chapter, and some of the questions that y'all had are answered in this chapter too. So we're on page 19, chapter 7. It was the strangest story Winnie had ever heard. She soon suspected they had never told it before except to each other, that she was the first real audience, for they gathered around her like children at their mother's knee, each trying to claim her attention, and sometimes they all talked at once and interrupted each other in their eagerness. 87 years before, the Tucks had come from a long way to the east, looking for a place to settle. In those days, the wood was not a wood, it was a forest, just as her grandmother had said. A forest that went on and on and on. They had thought they would start a farm as soon as they came to the end of the trees, but the trees never seemed to end. When they came to the part that was now the wood and turned from the trail to find a camping place. They had happened on the spring. It was real nice, said Jessie with a sigh. It looked just the way it does now. A clearing, lots of sunshine, that big tree with all those knobby roots. We stopped and everyone took a drink, even the horse. No, said May. The cat didn't drink. That's important. Yes, said Miles. Don't leave that out. We all had a drink except for the cat. Well, anyway, Jessie went on, the water tasted sort of strange, but we camped there overnight, and Paul carved a T on the tree trunk to mark where we'd been. And then we went on. They had come out of the forest at last, many miles to the west, had found a thinly populated valley, had started their farm. We put up a house for Ma and Pa, said Miles, and then a little shack for Jessie and me. We figured we'd be starting families of our own pretty soon and would want our own houses. That was the first time we figured there was something peculiar, said May. Jessie fell out of a tree. I was way up in the middle, Jessie interrupted, trying to saw off some big branches before we cut her down. I lost my balance, and I fell. He landed plumb on his head, said May with a shudder. We thought for sure he'd broke his neck. But come to find out, it didn't hurt him a bit. Not long after, Miles went on, some hunters came out one day at sunset. The horse was out grazing by some trees. They shot him. Mistook him for a deer, they said. Can you fancy that? But the thing is, they didn't kill him. The bullet went right on through him and didn't hardly leave a mark. Then Pa got a snake bite, and Jessie ate the poisoned toadstools. And I cut myself, said May. Remember slicing bread? But it was the passage of time that worried them the most. They had worked the farm, settled down, made friends, but after 10 years, then 20, they had to face the fact that there was something terribly wrong. None of them was getting any older. I was more than 40 by then, said Miles sadly. I was married, I had 2 children, but from the look of me, I still looked 22. My wife, she finally made up her mind I'd sold my soul to the devil. She left me. She went away, and she took the children with her. Okay, so they've discovered that this spring, a lot of you had that question, well, could they get hurt? Could they jump off a building and not get hurt? Could they get struck by lightning and not get hurt? Well, the answer is yes. The horse got shot, it lived. They got a snake bite. He ate some poisonous toads and they lived. So all these accidents happened and they lived through every single one of them. So the answer is yes. Any accident that happened, they were still going to live through it because of this spring water, they're thinking, that they drank. And we also found out that Miles got married at some point, and then his wife ended up leaving him because she thought, back then, they thought these things were true. She thought that he had sold his soul to the devil. And so she's like, I'm going to get out of here because this is craziness going on. Okay, we're in the middle of page 20. I'm glad I never got married, Jessie put in. It was the same with our friends, said May. They come to pull back from us. There was talk about witchcraft, black magic. Well, you can't hardly blame them. But finally, we had to leave the farm. We didn't know where to go. We started back the way we come, just wondering. We was like gypsies. When we got this far, it changed, of course. A lot of the trees was gone. There was people, and Tree Gap, it was a new village. The road was here, but in those days it was mostly just a cow path. We went on into what was left of the wood to make a camp. And when we got to the clearing, and the tree, and the spring, we remembered it from before. It hadn't changed no more'n we had, said Miles, and that was how we found out. Pod carved a T on the tree, remember, 20 years before? But the T was just where it'd been when he done it. The tree hadn't grown one whit in all that time. It was exactly the same. And the T he'd carved was fresh as if he'd just put it there. Then they had remembered drinking the water. They and the horse, but not the cat. The cat had lived a long and happy life on the farm, but had died some 10 years before. So they decided at last that the source of their changelessness was the spring. When we come to that conclusion, May went on, Tuck said, that's my husband, Angus Tuck. So now we know Mr. Tuck's first name is Angus. He said he had to be sure once and for all. He took his shotgun and pointed it at himself the best way he could, and before we could stop him, he pulled the trigger. There was a long pause. May's fingers laced together in her lap, twisted with the tension of remembering. At last, she said, the shot knocked him down, went into his heart. It had to, the way he aimed, and right on through him. It scarcely even left a mark. Just like, like shot a bullet through water. And he was just the same as if he'd never done it. After that, we went sort of crazy, said Jessie, grinning at the memory. Heck, we was going to live forever. Can you picture what it felt like to find that out? But then we sat down and talked it over, said Miles. We're still talking it over, Jessie added. And we figured it'd be very bad if everyone knowed about the springs, said May. We began to see what it would mean, she peered at Winnie. Do you understand, child? That water, it stops you right where you are. If you'd had a drink of it today, you'd stay a little girl forever. You'd never grow up. Not ever. We don't know how it works, or even why, said Miles. Pa thinks it's something left over from, some sort of other plan for the way the world should be, said Jessie. Some plan that didn't work out too good, and so everything was changed, except that the spring was passed over, somehow or other. Maybe he's right. I don't know. But you see, Winnie Foster, when I told you before that I'm 104 years old, I was telling the truth. But I'm really only 17. And so far as I know, I'll stay 17 till the end of the world. Okay, so we learned a ton in that chapter. We learned the whole story of how this everlasting life started. Okay, so what I want you to do for this chapter, I want you to go ahead. This is a perfect chapter to do a BME summary. Remember, beginning, middle, end. So you need to break up the chapter in beginning, middle, end. Okay, how did they find it? What happened once they did it in the middle of their life? And how did it end? How did they figure out, okay, we're really never getting older. Okay, so you need to do a BME summary for chapter 7. Okay. Remember, your summary needs to be 3 to 5 sentences, okay, for sure. After you do your BME summary, I want you to draw on the bottom of your notebook paper your favorite scene from this chapter. There's some funny little stories of things that the Tucks did. So I want you to draw your favorite scene from this chapter on the bottom of your summary. Your scene must be colored. And remember, you're graded not only on if it's a correct scene from the book, but your effort, the effort that took to make your drawing. Okay, you're not graded on ability, you are graded on effort. Okay, so BME summary, favorite scene, all on the same paper. Okay, and then when you're done with that, go ahead and turn it into the bin, and then you can go ahead and start on chapter 8, which is in another folder in Shobi.